Hello, I'm Daniel Weiss, your host, and you are listening to my podcast. If you are new to this podcast, my aim is to give you the insights so you learn how to master your mind and optimize your health for the peak performance that is sustainable. So hello and welcome. Today we are speaking with Heidi, who is a board certified specialist in sport dietetics and a registered dietitian. And Heidi specializes in sports and performance nutrition, oncology nutrition, sustainability and plant-based eating, which I believe that many of our listeners will be happy about. She also works with high school, collegiate and adult team sports, CrossFit athletes, endurance athletes, and of course, obstacle course athletes. And as I know, or as she has written in her bio, she has been since 2015 actually focused on triathlons, and you are hoping to complete your full Ironman in 2019, so which is next year, right?
That is.
Yeah, how is that going?
I haven't started training yet. I'm gonna do a late season one. So we'll see.
Oh, well, good luck with all of that.
Thank you.
And as you can see, you have a lot of studying or studies that you have done based on your, specialization and working with all these athletes. And I mean, you are certainly a person that I'm very happy to speak about, especially when it comes to sports nutrition and dietetics and plant-based eating. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation we will be having today.
Awesome, me as well.
And you also published a book recently, is that right?
What was that?
You also published a book recently.
I did, yeah. It's a plant-based recipe book focused on metabolic efficiency.
Yeah, so I'm sure that many people will look forward to hear about that as well. So, but let's start with this question: like, what's your favorite food actually?
What is my favorite food? Was that your question?
Yeah, what's your favorite food?
I would have to say peanut butter. And I'm sure anybody who knows me who is listening to this could have answered that as well. It's a very commonly known fact that peanut butter is top of my list.
That's perfect. So I'm not really into peanut butter, but if I was to choose like only one food, I would have really like very, very hard time.
Yep.
Yeah, so what was actually your reason to go plant-based?
So I went plant-based January of 2013. And really it just kind of came from the fact that I kind of realized that I would go, weeks at a time without eating any meat. I was doing my dietetic internship at the time and was living in Illinois and working mostly out of a hospital and didn't have a lot of money. And yeah, I kind of realized that I would go weeks at a time without eating it, and I didn't notice it, and I didn't miss it. And kind of the idea of having meat in my mouth all of a sudden just kind of grossed me out. And so I was like, well, I will stop eating meat. And then if I feel like I'm lacking in nutrients or whatever it might be, I'll go back to eating it and just, be smart about the choices that I'm making when it comes to meat. I grew up in a very environmentally conscious household and, so, thought, well, I'll save money. It's better on the environment. And if I'm not wanting it, then I might as well. And I didn't really plan on, taking out dairy or anything like that at that point. Actually, at the time was eating loads of cottage cheese and drinking lots of milk. But after I stopped eating meat, soon enough, kind of dairy seemed less appetizing. And so since then, it's really been a journey of just listening to my body.
Okay.
So I've done everything from completely raw vegan to vegan, vegetarian with eggs, no eggs, dairy, no dairy, pescatarian where I do fish. And like I said, really just kind of basing it on how I'm feeling, kind of being just in tune with what my body's saying as my training load changes and, life situation changes and things like that.
That's interesting. And what keeps you going forward with it? Because there are some people who in the beginning, like you mentioned, they have for example one reason, but then later this reason is not actual for them anymore, and for example they start with because they want to improve their health, but in the end they stay for ethical reasons or whatever. So has this changed for you as well?
I mean, I think it's a combination of a lot of things. It's, as I've, played back and forth with, varying nutrition lifestyles, noticing kind of what makes my body feel the best. And that's kind of on a daily basis, but then also in performance. So it's definitely kind of, energy, performance, health related. Knowing that, research does show various blood markers and things like that if you're eating a healthy plant-based diet, not a processed one, because we all know, you could live on Oreos and Fritos
yeah.
vegan, and that's not necessarily a healthy plant-based diet, but research does show that healthy plant-based diets do promote longevity and health, whether that's blood biomarkers and things like that. And so it's health related, it's performance and just like daily functioning and energy related. Mm-hmm. I find that my digestion is happiest when I'm not eating meat. And then also from, an environmental standpoint as well, for the most part, the meat industry contributes a huge amount to the pollution of our world. I think they said something
definitely
of, if everybody in the United States chose to not eat meat either for a day, I think it would be the equivalent of nobody in the United States driving for a day or for a week. Particularly the beef industry, the beef and dairy industry, do contribute a lot of pollution. And there are, certain vegan and vegetarian and plant-based kind of products on the market that are also, environmentally harmful just in terms of, how much energy or water, goes into producing different things. And so I am also kind of conscious of that when I'm, choosing between different plant-based products, trying to really reduce my carbon footprint as much as possible.
That's very nice and inspiring. And also, when we are speaking about this, let's say about meat and or livestock and so on, probably you are aware that there is now this kind of, let's call it vegan meat, or basically lab-grown meat that is being produced. So what's your take on that?
There's a very wide spectrum in terms of, again, looking at environmental health as well as, personal health. I do let my clients know who are interested in either becoming plant-based or have been for a long time, a soy sausage or a soy hot dog is no healthier than a standard hot dog.
Usually even worse, some of these products.
Still a very, very processed inflammatory product with, sometimes lots of sodium and preservatives and things like that. And so, you
a lot of oils.
Your spectrum of, unhealthy processed, fake plant meats up to really, really well constructed ones. You look at some of the things like, Beyond Burger and Impossible Burger, and even using things like jackfruit, and jackfruit doesn't necessarily have the protein, but it is a kind of an up and coming meat substitute. And so I do let educate people on what to look for, what you want and what you don't in a fake we'll call it fake meat product. And also how to, how to choose the best options at a grocery store, but then also how to kind of make your own, using tempeh and making bacon, or using, unsweetened coconut flakes and making bacon eggplant. It's one of the things that I have in my cookbook that I just got put out as a
Perfect.
kind of a resource section, and how to, make your own vegan cheese, how to make your own vegan bacon, because those are probably, when people say, I could never go vegan, because bacon and cheese are usually the top two on the list.
Definitely.
There are, better versions that are coming into the store, but they're really expensive, and vegan cheese is still hard to find one that melts well and tastes good, and they're really, really easy to make on your own, and a lot less expensive, and then you're controlling what's going in it. And so that's one of the things that I include in my recipe book is kind of a resource guide for making some of your own things like that, non-dairy milks and cheeses, I said, bacon, egg replacers, things like that.
Yeah, that's perfect, because I have a big problem with these vegan versions of cheese, which is actually what we have here is mostly produced based on coconut oil.
Oh yeah.
Which I mean, okay, coconut oil is good, but maybe not like when you have like this kind of cheese which has 98% of coconut oil, right? And it has like, you look on the label, it's like pure fat, and it has 0%, let's say, sugars and 0% proteins in it. So I mean, for me, this is not a really good food from the nutritional perspective. And yeah, so what is actually your favorite recipe? Which one from the book?
Oh, that's hard. I mean, they're all mine. I had to be very selective about choosing ones I'm gonna. So there's 45 recipes in there. It's broken into breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. So let me think. If I were to choose, I'll choose my favorite from each category. There's a smoothie in the breakfast category. It's actually the smoothie that I have every single morning. So that's probably one of my favorites from the breakfast section. Smoothies are easy, they're versatile. This is one that I found kind of checks all the boxes, and it tastes good. It it kind of fills all those gaps that need to be filled from a plant-based perspective. And then the snack section, there's two different puddings that are in there. One is a chocolate peanut butter and one is a pumpkin. Really easy to make.
Are these puddings like hot or cold?
Cold. So you just throw all the ingredients in a food processor and blend them up, and they're ready to go. Really, really easy. Again, higher in protein, lower in added sugars and things like that. And so those are probably one of my favorites from the snacks section. Ooh, there's also, this is tough. I've got a stuffed avocado that's in the snacks section. And then there's my lettuce wraps. I do some tofu lettuce wraps that are kind of a takeoff of P.F. Chang's, but a lot better for you. Those are in
Sounds great.
Section. Yeah, there's some good ones. There's stuffed sweet potatoes, stuffed avocados. There's some Mediterranean stuffed zucchini, a couple soups, kind of a good variety, a couple salads, like a vegan Caesar salad. So yeah, a little bit of everything. Some salads, some grain bowls, some soups, some sweet, some savory.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Some easy, some ones that have a few more ingredients. So kind of touch on something for everybody. My famous pad thai is in there, which is a big winner.
Oh, that sounds great. So actually, where can people find that book? On Amazon?
If you go to our company website, so that's www.energyperformance.com, and then click on the tab. If you're on a computer, it's going to be the upper right hand side. It says books. And then if you're on a phone, it'll be the three bars on the left hand side. And again, just go to books, and it's an ebook only right now. So it's $20. And if you pay, you get it immediately sent to your inbox. And so if there's enough popularity, potentially down the road it might become a print copy. But right now it is just an ebook.
Well, I hope so, and I will make sure to put the links in the show notes. And now let's go to the main topic, which is basically the fat adaptation, which we started also in the previous episode of this podcast with your colleague Bob.
Yep.
And just to recapitulate and maybe to put on some important things, so fat adaptation is basically based, as I understood, on blood sugar control. Is that right?
That is a big part of it. Yes, there are other underlying factors, but blood sugar levels do play a big role in your body's fat burning ability.
Mm-hmm. And since we are speaking now specifically about vegan athletes, and this is the topic that I would like to cover more. How does this translate to vegans? Because also most of the plant-based food sources are like starchy vegetables, or they are sources of carbohydrates. Even like when we speak about beans, lentils, which are sources of proteins, they have always some kind of carbs tied to them.
That is the biggest challenge that all of my plant-based athletes face. And shortly after I started working with Energy Performance, on my professional biography on the website, which you were reading at the beginning of the show, it does mention, that I'm an endurance athlete, and also a plant-based athlete, and that is also kind of my primary focus for when it comes to clients. And Bob's kind of methodology when it comes to improving your metabolic efficiency, like you said, it has a lot to do with, looking at these carbohydrate to protein ratios, essentially. So we say, and if someone is eating meat, it's really easy to figure out the ratio of carbs to protein that you're eating, because,
yeah, exactly.
Chicken is mostly, we'll just, say for simplicity's sake, it's 100% protein. There's no carbs, minimal fat. And so you can kind of say, okay, I'm eating this much chicken. I'm going to match that 1-to-1 with a sweet potato or wild rice or, something along those lines. And then, it's very easy to figure out those ratios. Whereas, like you said, most plant-based proteins also have carbohydrate, and, something like, legumes, lentils, black beans, usually have a 2-to-1 up to a 3-to-1 ratio of carbohydrates to protein just in the beans. And then, nuts and seeds are usually 1-to-1 ratio in terms of carbs to protein. And, you get into some of the soy products, and you get into, if someone does dairy, then, whatever it might be. But, it's really, really hard to kind of figure out how am I going to kind of match these carbohydrate to protein ratios. And so when people found out that Bob had a plant-based dietitian working for him and promoting metabolic efficiency, I just got email after email after email about how is this possible? How is this possible? Yeah. Because it is it's harder to figure out. And I do let, anybody I work with know that, you can, if eating plant-based is something that you are passionate about, whether it's your own health, whether it's, animal rights, whether it's the environment, and, you're an athlete who's wanting to perform at a high level, I was like, it is definitely doable on a plant-based diet. You can improve your metabolic efficiency. You can make your body a better, fat-burning machine, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But it does take more effort than if you were eating meat. There are little things you have to pay attention to, and, you have to kind of just be more knowledgeable of what's in your food. And that's kind of what my recipe book is very much based on. Is it gives people recipes everything from less than a 1-to-1 carbohydrate to protein ratio. So I have a cauliflower fried rice that I make, and it's vegan. And it is less than a 1-to-1 carbohydrate to protein ratio. My puddings are a 1-to-1 ratio, and then I have everything up to my tortilla soup, which is a 2-to-1. And it lists that on the recipe, what ratio it is. But it's very much just kind of becoming aware of what foods in each category. So which legumes, which seeds, which nuts, which vegetables have kind of that optimal carbohydrate to protein ratio, or have more protein than less. And focusing on those. So something like hemp seeds. Of all the different seeds out there, hemp seeds have the greatest, the highest amount of protein and the least amount of carbohydrates per serving. And so if you're looking to throw on a salad or in a smoothie, then hemp is a great choice. So little things like that, just kind of being able to pick out, okay, broccoli has a lot more protein than asparagus, so I'm gonna cook that with my beans, or I'm gonna put that in my soup, or I'm gonna throw that onto a salad versus a vegetable that's lower. And so it's just kind of doing a little more digging and being a little more educated.
Yeah, definitely, and I believe that this will help a lot of people in that aspect to understand better the food composition. And like you said, probably, I suppose, based on what you said, that a lot of these recipes will include a lot of seeds and nuts. And am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and do you also implement something or regarding seeds and nuts specifically, like some kind of processing them, like for example soaking them, sprouting them and such, to improve their bioavailability of certain nutrients? Or
yeah, I do. And I in the resource section, so in each individual recipe I don't necessarily require soaking or sprouting or anything like that, but in the resource section I do talk about the benefit of sprouting, soaking legumes, grains, nuts, and seeds, and kind of how you do it and then why you want to do it.
Wow, so that's perfect. So I think we have this covered, and when we are speaking also about this metabolic efficiency training, do you suppose that vegans can do it also on let's say higher carbohydrate diet than, let's say, compared to other people, when we talk about this, let's say, carbohydrates, or which have slow release of energy?
Are you asking if vegans can burn fat on a high carbohydrate diet? Is that your question?
Yes, exactly. Like compared to a person who has, let's say, normal kind of diet, when they eat all kinds of foods. Probably, as you mentioned, for them it's very easy to take a steak and, okay, this is my protein source, this is my fat source, this is my carbohydrate source. And since it is a little bit more complicated with vegans or vegan athletes, maybe you might not get all the benefits from going, like high fat, but instead of that, focus on foods that have like a lot of fiber and smart carbohydrates that release the energy slowly, and in that way control the insulin response.
Yeah. I mean, definitely. And it's high carbohydrate is a very loose term.
Yeah.
And, kind of like I was saying, what we know thus far about metabolic efficiency and improving your body's ability to use fat as fuel, kind of at those higher heart rates and higher intensities. like you mentioned, is a big part of it is blood sugar control. And so carbohydrates and the type of carbohydrates you're eating do have a big impact on that. And like you mentioned, smart carbohydrates. So more of the slow digesting carbohydrates, having lots of fiber. We talk about being able to, people oftentimes refer to the term net carbohydrates, and how your net carbohydrates is usually lower than your total carbohydrates because it has to do with the fiber. And so higher fiber carbohydrates, high fiber fruits and vegetables, legumes, nuts and seeds, whole grains, they have more fiber. And so, if you were to take a 1 cup of a wild rice versus 1 cup of a white rice, even though their kind of total carbohydrates are going to be pretty similar, when you look at the fiber content of the wild rice, the net carbohydrates are actually lower because you can kind of subtract part of the fiber that's in there. And so, recognizing those carbohydrates that are higher in fiber is definitely important. And even, utilizing things, when you're looking at training, something like a UCAN. UCAN is a company that came out several years ago, and their primary carbohydrate is hydrolyzed starch. So they kind of put their starch through this process, and they've, in all of the years of research they've done, have realized that because of how they, process their starch, that it doesn't cause a blood sugar spike like other starches. And so I've actually started, as I've kind of been on my own plant-based metabolic efficiency journey, I have been absolutely blown away by how stable my energy levels stay with UCAN, how my blood sugars stay stable. I can fuel a lot less because I'm not getting those spikes. And they still allow my body to burn fat at those varying intensities, whereas, having a kind of a standard, sports bar would spike my blood sugar and my insulin and kind of put me into that carb burning phase. So yes, definitely as a plant-based athlete, you need to be smart about the carbohydrates that you're taking in, and, knowing that a potato is going to be a better choice than potato chips, and, wild rice versus white rice, and really opting for lots and lots of high fiber fruits and vegetables. Like I said, legumes, nuts and seeds, and then knowing, of those, which ones have more protein than others. Like I said, hemp seeds versus sunflower or flax. But then protein is, kind of the other side of the equation. So, being smart about your carbohydrates and choosing high fiber options, smart carbs, but also recognizing that, even on a very smart carb diet, if you're consuming 80% carbohydrates, it's going to be hard to really kind of optimize your fat burning potential, because essentially the body burns the fuel that it gets. And so if you're feeding your body 80% carbohydrates, that's kind of what it's going to know how to burn. And so if you're not, putting in the protein and the fat, then it's essentially like I said, our body burns the type of fuel that we give it. And so, you can improve your metabolic efficiency on a solely plant-based diet. I actually did that this summer. I kind of played with my own plant-based nutrition, and watched the fluctuations in my metabolic efficiency. I tested myself about once a month, and I was able to improve my metabolic efficiency being plant-based. But it was, like you said, it was being smart about my carbohydrate choices, and then still being really intentional about, if I was having a big salad for lunch with lots of greens and lots of veg, maybe some legumes and seeds, maybe some tofu, or some tempeh. But, again, being very aware of how much of those veg I was eating versus how much of the protein sources, and, opting for hemp seeds or pumpkin seeds versus sunflower seeds. And rather than doing, lots of, some dried fruit on a salad plus a piece of fruit on the side, it was choosing one or the other. And then again, making sure that if I was going to use legumes, that I put a lot on. And was just kind of more aware of, okay, how can I really optimize the protein content of this meal? And like I said, I was able to improve my metabolic efficiency on a plant-based diet, both by paying attention to what types of carbohydrates I was eating, but also focusing on those higher protein plant-based sources.
Yeah, that sounds correct. And have you noticed also some performance benefits from doing that during your summer experiment?
Oh yeah. I was I had 3 kind of big trail races this summer. I did a half marathon and then a 50K and then a marathon. And I won 2 of the 3 races and took second in the other one. And I definitely can, especially the initial race that I did in May was kind of the first time I had raced since focusing on my metabolic efficiency. And I have never experienced the ability to hold such a high intensity at the end of a race for such a long period of time.
Sounds great.
And when I look at my, I used UCAN and only UCAN for all of my races. Different things depending on how long the race was. But when I looked at my heart rate after the race, my heart rates matched up with my metabolic efficiency test that I had just done in terms of showing that I was able to, use fat the entire race based on my heart rate, because I'd, kind of been training my body to use fat at a little bit higher heart rate. And then all of a sudden when I needed to kick, the last several miles of that half marathon, I was able to kind of tap into carbohydrate stores that hadn't been used up yet. That was the first time I personally experienced holy crap, this really works. This is so cool. I remember thinking as I was, sprinting to the finish, just being like, oh my gosh, this is nuts. And so being able to actually experience that as an athlete, pays dividends when I'm working with my own, clients, being able to say, hey, I'm plant-based. I just changed my focus, changed my priorities. I'm still plant-based and was able to make these huge gains, in my metabolic efficiency in a short amount of time. I mean, I improved it in, I think, 5 weeks. So it is something where, you do have to be intentional, kind of like I said, but it's definitely doable. And when you perform well, you definitely, it makes it worthwhile.
Well, and can you tell us also a little bit of nitty gritty, how does it work, the metabolic efficiency training when it comes to the fuel that you are using? Like you mentioned now that you actually were able to use more fuel as a source for your energy during higher rates, because when you pick up let's say a normal standard textbook from sports nutrition or whatever, you have, let's say, crossover point at about 75% VO2 max, and that's when you start to use predominantly your carbohydrates as a source of your fuel. So can you explain to us a little bit more about that?
You mean about metabolic efficiency in general, or about my own personal?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of how does it work? How is it possible that you are actually being able to burn more fat at higher, let's say, percentage of VO2 max or at higher heart rate?
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to what I was saying about kind of your body burns the fuel that you give it. And then, like you mentioned at the very beginning, very much about blood sugar control and your insulin levels and things like that. And so, I went in, having never tested my metabolic efficiency, felt like I ate, pretty well. And I went into my first test pretty confident. And then came back and the results were that I had no metabolic efficiency point, and into the terms where I was even at rest, burning more carbohydrates than fat.
Wow.
Instead of being, the competitive person that I was, so frustrated. And so, what happens is if you really focus on those carbohydrate and protein ratios, so like I said, whether it's, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, really kind of using your hands as this visual of, okay, how much protein am I getting? How much carbohydrate am I getting? And really getting as close to a 1-to-1 ratio as you can. Essentially what that does is it keeps your blood sugar significantly more stable throughout the day, because protein does a really, really good job of kind of helping to stabilize the blood sugar levels, decrease those insulin spikes. Obviously, also promoting a sense of fullness, increasing your metabolism. Research shows that, per gram protein increases our metabolism and takes more calories to burn than other fuels. And so by, not only are you, controlling your blood sugar and controlling your insulin, you're also promoting, healthy body composition and things like that. And so by keeping your blood sugar and your insulin more stable throughout the day, you have less spikes, less peaks. Your energy is more stable. You essentially, you're hitting a hormonal pathway that essentially chooses whether or not is going to utilize sugar that's available to it or start tapping into our blood. And so if you're eating a higher carbohydrate or an imbalanced carbohydrate diet, whether you eat meat or not, your insulin and blood sugar levels are going to be such that it promotes kind of carbohydrate burning all day throughout the day, because you're constantly either feeding it carbohydrate, or because of what's happening with your insulin and blood sugar, it's storing extra fat, it's needing to tap into some of those carbohydrate stores, versus, again, whether you eat plants or you eat meat, if you really are eating in a way that promotes kind of stable blood sugar levels, is limiting those insulin spikes throughout the day. When you limit an insulin spike, essentially what that does is it promotes fat utilization and fat oxidation rather than carbohydrate oxidation. And so someone comes into us and we test their metabolic efficiency, and we're able to give them nutrition guidelines based on their results. And nutrition is definitely 75% of the puzzle. And then we also recommend that they kind of 25% of it is going to be exercise, and we kind of give them a few exercise recommendations in terms of promoting fat oxidation and teaching their body to kind of keep burning fat. And so, and I mean, that's kind of the primary gist of it is, and some people their bodies respond very, very quickly in terms of, 4 or 5 weeks. Like I said, I was lucky enough that I saw a significant difference in 5 weeks. But I was, very intentional about, what I was putting in my body, and I didn't really change much when it came to my exercise. It was really focused on nutrition. But also, it can take up to 8 to 12 weeks to see a real.
But it's a relatively short time still.
Yeah, very, very true. And so essentially, we know that kind of what we eat day in and day out and how we eat on a daily basis has more of an effect on our performance than kind of what I choose to eat in the day of or the day before a race. And the metabolic efficiency is no different. It's like I said, it's your body learns to burn what you give it. And so if you're constantly feeding, excess carbohydrates and carbohydrates that are promoting blood sugar spikes versus those smart carbs that kind of have more fiber in them, you're just, pretty much enabling your body to, burn carbohydrates all the time, because that's what it's being fed. So
Yes, and what about the peak performance? Like when you spoke about, or when you mentioned that during your run or a race, you were able to tap into that speed in the end of the race, and you felt great, fantastic.
yeah.
Typically what people say or what is said is that uh, when you are training your metabolism or your body to burn fats as a
Mhm.
primary source of fuel, you are also at the same time down regulating the use of carbohydrates, right?
Yep. Yep, that's correct.
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear it.
Oh, sorry, I just said yes, that's correct.
Yeah, so I mean, this theoretically should also hinder your performance, right? At the top speed levels.
I mean, yes and no. I mean, we're always burning a little bit of both, for the
Yeah.
most part, until you really hit that 100% of your VO2 max. Our body's constantly at a state of burning some combination of fat and some combination of
Mhm.
carbohydrates. Um, and it's again, it's very much about the training. And so if someone who is on a typical, so we'll say Western higher carbohydrate diet, with a lot of
Let's define higher carbohydrates. What would be the proportion of macros?
we'll say 65% or greater carbohydrates,
Okay.
and really mostly like processed carbohydrates, so not those high fiber fruits and
Uh-huh.
vegetables, but your processed breads and starches and things like that. There, and if they, even many of my elite athletes are consuming a high carbohydrate diet, because that's kind of what we've been taught as endurance athletes, is that our body needs carbohydrates. And so if I were to have somebody run a marathon or a half marathon, on their normal diet, and then a week later, or whatever it was, with no change in nutrition, I would ask them to do the same thing, but fueling more from a metabolic efficiency standpoint, they would do terribly, because they haven't trained their body to be able to use fat.
Mhm.
And so kind of by we look at kind of what we call our fat max curve, which is the heart rate at which, or the percent of VO2 max where fat utilization and fat oxidation and fat burning are the greatest percent. And we see that usually about 60-65% of VO2 max is when fat oxidation is the highest. Is kind of what research shows today. I mean, you do see outliers, so you see significantly lower, all the way up to we've seen a few anomalies where people are burning primarily fat at 90%, of VO2 max, and that's unheard of. But again, that's something that you train your body to do through your training, and your nutrition. And I don't have. I'm sure I could pull it up while we're talking. Um, my first and my second metabolic efficiency test. Like I
Yeah, we
said,
can maybe put it in the show notes afterwards or something.
yeah. There we go. Because like I said, I tested myself 4 times and saw huge changes from test 1 to test 4. But even just between the first 2 tests, I saw, let's see, saw huge changes in terms of my body burning more fat at a higher heart rate, which, like I said,
Mhm.
I really felt like that's what made the difference in that race, was the fact that I previously uh I would have been needing to use carbohydrates uh at that heart rate, but because I had trained my body to use fat at a higher heart rate, I was able to kind of save those carbs for when I needed them.
Yeah, definitely. And that sounds like a very sound strategy for somebody who is like, let's say, amateur athlete who doesn't necessarily uh, is looking for like really peak performance, but their primary goal can be like not to bonk or just enjoy the race and don't come to the finish completely destroyed. But I mean, of course, at the same time, there is a benefit for people who are top performers, right?
Yeah.
So specifically like, let's say, Olympic athletes and such.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I mean, and you look at, short to middle distance is going to benefit. Long endurance athletes, you're looking at Ironman athletes or stage race cyclists or ultra runners can benefit. And one of the other huge benefits that I know I definitely appreciate, and a lot of athletes do as well, particularly runners, is you can take in fewer calories because again your blood sugar is stable. You're using body fat for more of your race, and our bodies have almost unlimited fat stores.
Yeah.
In a race, it is literally impossible for someone to tap into to completely exhaust their fat stores. Whereas carbohydrates, we have several thousand, and in something like an Ironman or 100-mile run, you're gonna blow through those. And so when you're using a kind of a limitless energy source, you can take in significantly less fuel, which from a kind of a digestion and gut standpoint is a huge benefit. Particularly like I said with runners who deal with so many stomach issues because of the up and down motion of running. Being able to take in less and perform better is, in my opinion, one of the biggest benefits, hands down.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people that I communicate with, they mention this problem, that they have problems with nutrition during the run, right? So that they would go far and beyond just to get rid of these problems, and even go.
So I just pulled up my data from my 2 tests, and so like I said, so my first test, even at rest, I mean not during my complete rest, but as soon as I started warm up, I was burning more carbohydrates than fat, and so when I started, my heart rate was 147. That was after a 10-minute warm up. So that would have been, about 14 minutes in. Very easy pace. I was running at 5.9 miles an hour. My heart rate was 147, and I was already burning 56% carbohydrate. And then you look at my second test, like I said, 5 weeks later, and I was burning primarily fat, around 60% fat up until I was running 8 miles an hour, and my heart rate was 166 beats per minute. And so, I mean, that's, not only I was running significantly faster and my heart rate was significantly higher. And so kind of like I said, that's a perfect example of, if when I was running that half marathon, I think I remember looking and, my heart rate was kind of under that 166, but above that 147. Whereas previously, I would have needed to use carbohydrates in that race. But because of the training I had been doing with my nutrition, I was able to use fat that whole time. And then when my heart rate did kind of finally hit that point where I needed to use carbohydrates, I had the carbohydrates there, which I had never had in the past. And like I said, I just, I was, 2.5-ish miles to the finish, and I just kept expecting my legs to stop, like just to kind of hit that wall, and it never happened. It was an incredible feeling.
Yeah, I'm happy about that. And so, do you have any specific advice when it comes? This was mostly about running, trail running, and how does this translate also to OCR athletes? Because I work with a lot of OCR athletes, and during these races you have like, well, it's aerobically based sport, definitely, but you have also these bursts of energy, bursts of, your heart rate is all over the place during the race.
No, so OCR is a perfect example, because, like you said, especially as you get into some of those longer OCR races, it is very much an endurance event. It's, very much aerobic between those high heart rate sections, but you do have those high heart rate sections in there, hitting an obstacle or whatever it might be. And so, one of the other components of metabolic efficiency is how fast your body is able to get back to a heart rate where you can burn fat. And so that's something when we do someone's test that we look at is we bring them back after after they hit their metabolic efficiency point, are using mostly carbohydrates. We take them back to kind of their warm up pace and see, okay, how long does it take you to get back into a place where you're burning primarily fat? What is your heart rate?
So basically, how long does it take you to recover?
Exactly. And so, and that piece of information is huge, especially if someone is able to have their heart rate on like a GPS watch or has their, a heart rate chest strap on, and they can get the data from it, because they can then know, okay, they can keep their heart rate, under whatever it's needed to burn fat. They hit an obstacle, they know their heart rate's going to spike. But then they can also watch their heart rate drop and be able to see, okay, like I got back into fat burning really quickly that time, or certain obstacles might take them longer. And so by knowing kind of what heart rate that is, where you individually will kind of tap into carbohydrate burning over fat burning and then getting back down, you can really, really individualize your racing nutrition and your training nutrition based on that information. Because you do have those high heart rate, more anaerobic bursts as an OCR athlete, you are going to have to, recognize that you will have to incorporate some more carbohydrate into your training, into your daily nutrition. Versus if someone is an ultra trail runner, and then they switch to doing OCR, that's something where they are going to have to be strategic about inserting some carbohydrates into their training and racing, because those high heart rate anaerobic bursts do happen.
Yeah, that sounds great, actually. So basically, to wrap it up, this metabolic efficiency training is about being able to burn fat at a higher percentage, at higher heart rate or higher VO2 max.
Yep.
It can help you to recover in between, let's say, the bursts of activity or exercise, being better at burning fat as your primary source during the day, which means stable blood sugar levels, and which translates to stable energy levels throughout the day, which many people don't have right now. So you will probably also be less likely to snack on all the kind of foods and be like having this grueling hunger.
Yep.
So basically, this is indirectly also saying you will have better health.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you look at what it does to, your body's ability to, burn our visceral fat or abdominal fat, the fat that might be between our organs. The results that we've seen in, people's blood levels in terms of, from a chronic health standpoint. And when you're promoting blood sugar stability and, fewer insulin spikes, it takes a lot less of a toll on your internal organs, your pancreas, things like that. And so, yes, as someone who is, an athlete or who is very active or physically active, there's definitely performance benefits to improving your metabolic efficiency. But also for those who aren't necessarily as concerned about performance, there is huge benefit just in your general chronic health as well. Improving your resting heart, your resting metabolic rate, your resting heart rate, things like that. So
Yeah. So it's a good, well-rounded plan for health and fitness.
definitely.
Yeah. Okay, Heidi. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Yes.
And
Thanks for having me, Dan.
I hope that many people found inspiration and some new knowledge during our conversation.
I hope
I
so
would
as well.
also, yes, I'm also very happy that you introduced your book to us, and how can people, especially those who care more about being on this plant-based side of the table, how they can improve their fitness, improve their health, and find inspiration in the book through recipes. And yes, I will include links in the show notes, as you already mentioned, on your website. Where can they purchase the book? And is there anything that you would like to maybe shout out at the end of the podcast episode?
Sorry, what was that?
Is there anything like you would like to add in the end of this episode, like maybe where people can find you?
Oh
Or
yeah. So yeah, if you go on our website, and you can put the link in there, Dan, but it's www.energyperformance.com, and you can click on our nutrition tab under sports dietitians. You can also just Google me, Heidi Strickler. I think I might be the only one out there. And feel free to email me anytime. My email is on the website. It's just Heidi at energyperformance.com. Definitely recommend my recipe book. It's easy, it's straightforward, especially for someone who is plant based and wants to improve their metabolic efficiency. The recipes tell you, right there what ratio they are, and there's the educational piece too in terms of the resource guide with how to really kind of eat the healthiest version of a plant based diet. And there are definitely some treats in there as well. I like dark chocolate just as much as I like peanut butter, and so so there's some good treats in there as well. But yeah, definitely don't hesitate to reach out if you have questions. Shoot me an email. You can find all of my information on our website, including the recipe book.
that sounds great. So thank you once again for your time, and hope to see you next time.
Yes, thanks, Dan. Have a good one.
Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and see you next time. If you liked it, please share, subscribe, and you will find all the important links in the show notes or below video, however you got to this. So there will be also a page to subscribe, my Facebook page, my website, and if you are looking for a coach or coaching experience, you are looking to boost your performance, whether it's mental or physical, to the next level, then go to my website that is linked down below and contact me through there.